What makes college history classes better than high school history classes? I've thought about this a little bit. I've thought about it a lot more recently now that I have had more history classes under my belt these past couple semesters. I've taken 7 in the past 3 semesters. Um, and I think I've thoroughly enjoyed all of them more than I did any of my history classes in high school. And that's not to say I didn't like my history class in high school. I took APs. They were very fun, very challenging, and the majority were pretty interesting. But what made college history classes so much more interesting to me, and I think to a lot of other people that I've found that have reignited a love for history through college education. And I think the first one, the major one that I can think of immediately, is the readings. In high school, it's all standardized, whether you're doing your own state's curriculum or if you're doing the College Board AP curriculum. The the courses are very standardized. You need to learn X, Y, and Z to be able to do A, B, and C on the exam, whether it be your standardized exam or the College Board AP exam. You need to learn how to do this. You need to learn X date, Y time, etc., etc. It's very formulaic. And because of that, the only reading you really do, if you had to do readings, I personally was lucky enough to where the majority of my history classes, maybe minus AP Gov, we didn't really have to do the reading from the textbook. It was, additional reading if you wanted to learn more outside of the class, but nothing required. AP Gov was a little bit different. He made and that was more document based, like we're reading the Federalist Papers, we're reading more primary sources of that time rather than the standardized books. But I think in history in college, you benefit a lot from having much more flexible coursework, much more focused coursework, to where your classes are a lot more specific in what they're studying, so they can have a lot more of a directed reading curriculum for you. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I read all the books that I needed to. I definitely didn't. There's a ton of books back over there that I either started and didn't read because I was busy in other classes, or if I just didn't read it in general because I thought I could get by. And you can. But the ones that I did choose, and even the little excerpts from the ones that I didn't read, are 9.99999 out of 10 times better than the textbook readings because they're picked by the professor because they think that that'll get you the best amount of information going forward. And I think while your textbook, it gives you your information, it gives you your dates, your times, your people. There's no narrative involved. This is the most boring reading you can possibly ever read. It is a textbook. Whereas college courses choose books that are history books, books about history. They're written by scholars or some professional authors, but a lot of scholarly work. And if it's, written for a scholarly environment, those are a little bit more difficult to read. Like if you're reading like historical monographs, those are obviously a little bit more difficult to read. And, those might be very dense with information or have a certain burden of expectation of previous knowledge that you need to have to read it, like having a higher bar of entry. But they all follow a narrative structure because at the end of the day, they're books. They're not textbooks. They are books written for an audience that's not just standardized testing. I think that makes learning the content so much more approachable because you're reading things written by an author who has their own voice and their own biases and their own stylistic choices that they make throughout the reading or throughout their writing that makes the reading actually tolerable and enjoyable to do. Like I can give you an example, one of my anecdotes. I'll use both a high school example and then a college example. In high school, I took AP World History back before they changed the curriculum, which I could make an entire video on that. Finding out they changed the curriculum, I literally spoke to my AP World teacher the other year when I was still when I was in college, so I hadn't spoken to him in a couple of years, solely about them changing the curriculum because he was pissed about it. I was pissed about it. It's ridiculous. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. But in AP World, or no, and that's an entirely different tangent because I was thinking before I started recording about the curriculum change and I got pressed. Now I'm gonna change gears. I took AP US history as well, and so we had 2 readings. We had the big thick textbook, like probably that thick by like that wide. We never had to read out of that. My teacher, though, also gave us, we were lucky enough to have the AMSCO books, which is a lot more summarized, those are pretty easy to read at some points. Easy enough to where when I took AP Euro, requested that my school bought it. They didn't, but I requested that they bought it at least, because I thought if I'm going to have to do any reading, I would want to do it through AMSCO. And those were less optional than the textbook, but still relatively pretty optional. And I read them. I read it as often as I could, as I needed to read. Basically, as soon as I realized, like in quizzes or in writings, that I didn't know what I was doing, I read the AMSCO to catch up a little bit and to get like some further information, name-wise and everything like that. But it was never something I wanted to read. It was never something that I was interested in reading. It was a slog to read through, to the point where even if I wasn't taking notes, which I never did for my readings, they would still take sometimes hours, because it's just not an interesting text. Now, flash forward, spring or fall semester last year, I took a class on World War One. I've talked about this class before. Specifically, I've talked about the books in that class specifically. But World War one of the most informationally densest eras. There's so much context you need to know. I still don't know it all. I absolutely don't know it all. And my professor said the exact same thing. And he is a scholar in World War One. But one of the books he had us recommend he recommended for us to read. And by recommended, we had to read the entire fucking thing in a week. Pardon the French. It's called Sleepwalkers, 400-page book monograph of World War One, basically breaking you down decade by decade, 1890 to 1915 or so. And it touched a little bit on post-war as well. 400 pages where it just systematically broke down in a very, very dense historical way, using names, dates, times, as well as the like all unclassified document, with a ton of extra research. Systematically broke down every single country, what they were doing in every single year through the war, and why every country thought that what they were doing for the war was one way or another, whatever. The best history book I've ever read in my life. The most difficult history book I've ever read in my life. It's extremely dense, but at the same time, you could tell that it was picked it was chosen as a book, as a text for the class for a reason. It was written by a knowledgeable scholar. The professor knew their stuff about the book because they are a scholar. And I think I'll get on that a little bit later about how professors in general, I think, in my experiences, have helped make history classes more accessible than in high school. But books like Sleepwalkers that are chosen for their content rather than just because they follow a curriculum help make the class a better experience, because they're chosen for their content rather than filling out what the county needs or what your state needs. And so some of them are more difficult, and some of them I never read, and some of them I didn't need to read. But I think all in all, the readings are much more achievable, much more doable, and much more enjoyable than in high school if you had to do it there. And another reason why I think so, and this is no disrespect to any of the history teachers I've had, because they're all extremely knowledgeable people, because they've all done the exact same coursework, relatively, that I'm doing. So I know exactly what they've gone through, they had to do in their college careers up to this point to become a history teacher. But professors being experts in their subject, being more specialized in their area, teaching a course on things they might have actually researched to the T for their doctoral thesis, or in some cases, written entire books about, I think makes it so much. It makes the class flow better, and it makes it a more open environment to asking questions, to understanding the material, and bridging the gap when you don't. I don't have any negative examples from high school, because I think all my teachers in high school were extremely knowledgeable about their subject. Like, they are the closest that I've seen. But I also know a lot of my friends who did not take the AP classes and were just doing normal history classes through the, using the state requirements, had issues with their teacher in one way or another, where they don't know everything, and that's okay. You're not supposed to know everything. And like, the professors will tell you that first and foremost, or just being unable or unenthusiastic. to answer questions, or even like during their lectures themselves. Whereas in my experience, again, this is all, it's a little bit late in the video to make a preface, but this is all my personal experience. I know people in my own history department who have had much worse experience with some professors, even some professors that I've liked. They've had worse experiences. And there are downsides to history classes in college, and that could be a different video itself. I'm thinking the grading, but with a professor who's an expert in their field, specifically in the class that, more than likely in the class that they're teaching, that flow of knowledge is a lot easier for them. It's a lot easier for them to explain the nuances in a way that is digestible because they've spent years of their life researching it and getting to the bottom of it. And I think it makes it easier for them to answer questions about it because they have done their research in it for multiple years at the bare minimum. And again, at the maximum, have written entire books about it. I just think with the way that professors, or my school and then a lot of other schools, have professors teach their classes in history being in their area of expertise, it allows for a better classroom environment just because they're more easily able to teach what they're passionate about, what they like, and what they know. And that passion flows through very easily. I think a passionate professor makes a class 10 times more enjoyable. A knowledgeable professor makes a class 10 times more informative because they can answer questions and they can direct you to further resources if you're not understanding still, or if you want more information and that type of thing. I think the last true big difference that I've thought of, while I was thinking about this, because it's something that's crossed my mind a little bit, because I want to be a teacher eventually. That is the goal. I don't know. I don't remember if I've said that before. I want to be a teacher eventually. That is the main goal, is to eventually teach, whether it's a high school level or I go to grad school and become a professor eventually. But I think just how you have to do the work, the type of work that gets done in these classes is different. It's fundamentally different because there are different expectations for high school versus college, even in the APs. I mean, I know IB is also different, but I did not do IB. But in high school, you have your standardized tests for your state, and then you have your standardized tests for like College Board if you're taking APs. And so you have to know a certain set of skills. You need to be able to do your multiple choice. You need to be able to do your primary source reading. You need to be able to do your FRQ, SAQ, and DBQ for like AP World and Euro and stuff like that. Or LEQ. SAQ, LEQ. FRQ is math. SAQ, short answer. Yeah. Short answer, long essay, and DBQ, document based. So no matter, even if they're a great professor or even if they're a great teacher and your content is interesting, like it was for me, you're still getting taught to a very strict outline of what you need to learn. You need to learn how to analyze passages and be able to answer multiple choice questions about them. And that's, again, specifically knowing your specific dates, times, people, and knowing the context of that, that's a good skill. That is a good skill. I use that skill every day. Your SAQ, you look at a question, you're able to write a couple sentences. That's a lot just of knowing the content. That's fine enough, fair enough. LEQ, you get a long prompt and you do that. And then your DBQ, you get documents, you write an answer solely based off those documents. That's the easiest thing in the world to BS, bar none. But that is such a strict regimen of what you need to learn. You're doing all of your learning in history class in high school in the context of answering that exam. Whereas I think for a lot of the courses that I've had in college, it's a lot more open-ended, a lot more essays, a lot less multiple choice. I don't think I've taken a single multiple choice history exam. I don't think I've even taken a single multiple choice math exam, but that's different. That's different for sure. But for history, I've had a good couple blue books. So I've had term IDs, which is, I think, the closest you'll get to the high school type thing where you need to know. And even the term IDs allow for more flexibility and knowledge than a multiple choice exam or a short answer question does in a high school class setting. Term IDs Not my favorite type of exam. For sure, not my favorite type of exam. But I could still see the use because you have to learn your context. You have to learn the why and the how of why that, or of what that term is and why was it important. How is it important? How did it affect the history of it all? And so I can see what that is important. But I think the biggest thing that allows you to, I think, learn better is writing essays. Rather than writing essays just based on prompts, because I've had some exams which they just give out some prompts and say, all right, go for it. Go shoot your exam. Like, shoot this essay, go for it, basically in an LEQ form, if we're making analogs here. But more than likely, it's going to be, or not more than likely, but in some instances, it's going to be on the books you've read. Use the books that you have read. Use all of the information from the books that you have read to give an answer to either a general question or make a position paper about a position that's within your book. I've had to do both, specifically for World War I. I did both of those. We read a couple books and they said, all right, this is your base question. Use evidence from this book, and this book to support your claim. That allows for such a more open-ended learning experience because you can make arguments. In DBQs, that's not you can make an argument. You have to make a thesis, and you do that. It's make your thesis. And if you can use your documents to defend your thesis, it's a valid thesis. It's the same type of exercise here, but it's so much more flexible than just looking at your documents and saying, this is what I did. This is what I was taught to do. This is what I did. Look at your documents. What argument is the easiest to make with these documents? How can I use all 7? How can I get all 9 points in the DBQ? Versus in an essay for the college level of using your books, your sources are so much wider and so much larger. There's a larger breadth of sources than just the 7 documents. Or in the LAQ, nothing. You get nothing. And it just helps you understand your information better. Because I can still remember the exact topic of my first ever college history essay. And it was about the age of Jackson. I can't remember a damn thing about my AP World exam or my APUSH exam or my Euro exam or my Gov exam. I can't remember a thing about any of them. And that might be because, again, they're farther away. I took those 7 years ago or 6 years ago at this point. But I can still remember my first ever college essay that I wrote because I had to make a position based solely on what I've learned. No documents that are curated specifically to answer this question. They basically said, this is your prompt. Use all of your reading, make an argument, defend it, and that's okay. I said the Age of Jackson is a stupid name. I said the Age of Jackson is not a cool name. I think if anything, it should have been called the Age of the Democrat because you're forgetting other important figures of that era like Martin Van Buren. And I said someone else as well, and I got docked points because I did support the other person. I fucking love Martin Van Buren though. But so I was having open-ended essays rather than your very structured, rigid essays that you have to write. Or, and again, in some cases, that's talking about AP. If you're just doing normal history, your state exams, those are just multiple choice. Those are all multiple choice. There's no creative thinking. There's no allowance for any type of advanced thought process going on when you're learning it. Because I remember for AP World, I had to do AP World. I did the AP exam, which at that point in time was the old curriculum, so it was prehistoric to the present. So you had 6 different time periods, and then I had to take my state's exam on completely unrelated content to AP World, because AP World covered a much broader time period. AP World was specifically required by College Board to only include, I believe it's at most 20% talking about Europe. And my state exam talked a fuck ton about Europe. And it was so, with all due respect, brain dead easy. None of us studied in my class because we were studying for the AP exam, and we all passed it either way. And that just shows the lack of critical thinking that's required at a high school history level. And I think that lack of critical thinking feeds into a lack of a drive to learn history in high school compared to in college, where you're allowed to use a much wider breadth of sources to make more extravagant claims historically. You can make an argument as long as you can defend your argument. And I think that there's creativity involved in the college history world that I think really helps it be a much more interesting field when you're able to explore all those different avenues. I don't know why particularly I made this video. I kind of got just spur of the moment inspiration because I was thinking about it. Literally like an hour ago. I was thinking about it an hour ago. And I thought it'd be fun to talk about a little bit because it's all stuff I agree. I personally feel, especially because I want to teach history at some capacity. And so I feel I'm passionate about why history doesn't work for some people in high school, because I know some people who got turned off from history in high school, and it's due to standardized testing, which, Jesus Christ, I could talk about standardized testing all day. Standardized testing and the different formats, but at the end of the day, I'm just yammering. It's way too late. It's again, I'm really riding the wave of post midnight inspiration to make videos. I hope I keep this up because I enjoy doing it. I don't enjoy holding the mic. Actually, I really miss my mic stand, but I broke it. I really don't remember where any of the pieces went. I didn't even break the whole thing either. I just broke like the actual part that hangs. So I don't have a mic stand, or it's literally right there, but I just can't figure out how to fix it, or I haven't even looked at how to fix it. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed listening to me rant about that. I'll probably make another video talking about why college history classes fail sometimes, because some of them aren't great and some of them have issues that are different than the issues from high school classes. I can talk the same thing about math classes, but that's going to be a much longer and more, with all due respect, it's going to be a much more bitchy video where I'm going to be complaining a lot more. But hope you all enjoyed. Thanks.